Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking an unflinching look at some research that really challenges the foundational assumptions of running a successful service-based business.
Mhm.
If you are a consultant or an expert or, a specialist selling your time and knowledge, you might be looking outward for the reason your business isn't growing.
Right, you're looking at the market, your competition, the economy, all the usual suspects.
Exactly.
But our sources today suggest that the true limiter is, well, it's much closer to home. We are diving into material built around a, frankly, startling premise.
Which is,
The primary block to a consultancy's scale and success isn't any of those external factors. It's not a lack of a network. It's not even a deficit in your technical expertise. It is the owner's personal development. It's their thinking and their capacity to evolve as a leader.
that premise is, it's both incredibly frustrating and at the same time deeply empowering.
It is.
It immediately removes all the external excuses, forcing a level of self-examination that, let's be honest, most business owners would prefer to avoid.
Oh, absolutely.
So our mission today is clear. We need to extract a practical, actionable framework, a way to identify and then dismantle this invisible wall that just halts growth.
And that requires a profound shift in focus.
Yeah.
You have to move completely away from that exhausted mindset of managing an endless workload
Right.
and move toward the strategic task of managing and really upgrading the self. It's kind of a shortcut to becoming a better, more effective leader by understanding that your business is merely a mirror. It's reflecting your own capacity right back at you.
And we've got some very specific, grounded material here. It's all centered around the observable experiences of consultants in these highly specialized fields.
Yeah, particularly quantity surveyors or QS.
Mm-hmm.
And while the case studies, they focus on people who are brilliant at construction cost management, the lessons, they're absolutely universal.
For anyone who sells expertise.
Anyone. Engineers, architects, high-level financial advisors, we're basically charting a journey that moves a consultant from being stuck on that operational treadmill.
Just perpetually trading time for money.
Exactly. To finally achieving scalable, profitable control.
Okay, so let's unpack that core limitation right away.
Mhm.
The statement is blunt. Your consultancy will only grow as fast as you do.
Right.
The capacity of the business is, it's inherently capped by the capacity, the thinking, and the bandwidth of the owner.
And what makes this so difficult for these high-level consultants to swallow is the caveat that this limitation isn't about their technical capacity.
No.
It is what we see everywhere in the expert services world. It's a crisis of competence.
A crisis of competence.
Yeah, the sources focus on quantity surveyors. And look, these are individuals who are technically brilliant. They are sharp estimators. They handle incredibly complex contracts. They're excellent with their clients.
These are people who have worked on multi-billion-dollar projects.
Multi-billion-dollar infrastructure, commercial real estate. They have all the credentials, the impeccable track record, and that highly specialized knowledge that commands a premium.
So by any definition, they are absolute masters of their specific technical craft. They know the work inside and out.
Precisely. They are masters of the service. But the moment they try to make that transition from being a brilliant employee or maybe a freelance expert to running a scalable practice,
With real business.
a business that is structured to run without their constant physical input, they hit the exact same invisible wall.
And the sources are really clear on this. Your technical expertise, your credentials, they're essential for delivery, but they are fundamentally insufficient for business scaling.
They're insufficient.
Yeah.
The skills you need to execute the service are often, and this is the key, they're often antithetical to the skills required to lead and structure a high-growth organization.
So they master the how-to of the service.
But they completely fail at the how-to of running a sophisticated business entity.
That distinction is it's crucial. It's the difference between being a brilliant mechanic and being the CEO of a successful chain of auto shops.
Perfect analogy.
The mechanic skills might get you your first customer, but they won't build the chain.
Absolutely. And what stops them from building that chain is the inability to grasp that their consultancy is structurally limited to the height of their personal development as a leader and a strategist. You simply cannot outsource your own leadership limitations.
Okay, so if technical expertise isn't the problem, the limitation has to be either strategic or psychological.
It is.
Let's dive into the case study of Mark, a chartered QS, because his story just perfectly details this trap of busyness.
It really does.
He had the ideal professional setup, highly respected meticulous work, all the right credentials, and yet he was stuck. He was stuck in a cycle that felt increasingly exhausting.
Mark's situation is the textbook definition of the high-skill service provider trap. And the first mistake, the classic one, he was constantly charging hourly rates.
Which fundamentally caps your capacity.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Because your unit of value is time, and time is finite. So he's juggling too many clients, each one demanding this individualized hour-by-hour attention. The description in the sources is so vivid, he was in a state of perpetual under pressure, just stuck on the treadmill.
Unable to stop running long enough to even see where he was going.
Let alone catch his breath.
Yeah.
His days were just reactive, constant client firefighting, administrative overhead, just chaos.
And the sources, they pinpoint this dangerous cycle of self-deception that comes with being on that treadmill. I mean, Mark wasn't ignorant. He knew he was overwhelmed.
Of course.
But he was chasing a false solution, one that just kept him running harder instead of stopping to think.
And that false solution is always external. The owner tells themselves, I just need to hire one more person, to take this low-level work off my plate.
Or, if I can just land that next big project, then I'll have the capital to invest in the right structure.
Exactly. And that is the core fallacy. They believe the solution lies in more activity, more labor, more revenue, more hours. Mark was trying to scale his workload, increase the speed of the treadmill.
But not his thinking.
Not his thinking. He was confusing activity, that sheer, exhausting busyness, with genuine strategic progress.
Okay, but help me understand the mechanism there. Why is hiring more people a false solution if the bottleneck is clearly workload? That seems counterintuitive.
Because the workload itself is often disorganized, it's inefficient, and it relies entirely on the owner's personal knowledge and availability.
I see.
So if Mark hired another person, he wouldn't just be adding capacity, he'd be doubling the complexity of an already disorganized time-for-money operation.
Yeah.
He would spend his very limited strategic time training, managing, and fixing the mistakes of the new hire.
All while still operating without any clarity on his niche, his systems, or his boundaries.
Right. So he'd end up with two people running on an increasingly rickety treadmill instead of just one.
So the root issue isn't the lack of labor, it's the lack of a system that defines value outside of time spent. It's this inability to leverage the expertise he clearly possesses in a business structure that protects his time and multiplies his value.
That's it.
This invisible wall, then, is essentially the hard boundary of the owner's current management and strategic capacity.
It is the defining moment. It's when the owner realizes that the technical skills that made them a brilliant, sought-after consultant are actively working against them in their attempt to be a brilliant CEO. The skills required to manage a project, budget, meticulous detail, deep technical review, time tracking, are vastly different from the skills required to manage a business vision.
Like strategic delegation, systems design, high-level financial modeling.
Exactly. Mark had mastered the former, but he had entirely neglected the latter. He was, in effect, still operating as the highest-paid technical employee in his own firm.
And that realization leads directly into the necessity of the transition we're about to explore, moving from operational execution to strategic architecture. This is where the consultant has to begin scaling their thinking, not just their hours.
So this transition from managing projects to managing oneself, from reacting to the market to, strategically shaping one's own business, it's the pivotal shift.
It's everything.
But as we touched on earlier, those first steps towards strategic work are almost always met with heavy emotional resistance.
I can absolutely imagine. When a strategy coach or an advisor comes in and asks a consultant to spend a week defining their long-term vision, the response is often just panic.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this stuff. I need to chase revenue. And that immediate rejection of strategic work perfectly encapsulates the confusion between activity and true progress.
It's a defense mechanism, really. A self-protective habit. They feel that if they stop doing the technical work for a day or two, the entire operation will collapse.
Proving that they're indispensable.
Which is exactly what keeps them locked in the operational loop. But the sources show that for Mark, the breakthrough came with the power of clarity. He had to realize, after a really honest look, that the problem wasn't a lack of external opportunity.
No, the construction market was busy, his reputation was excellent.
The problem was entirely internal. A paralyzing lack of clarity, structure, and strategic leadership, and all of those elements were completely under his control.
That internal realization is the gateway to scaling your thinking. And the framework they use to guide Mark involved three fundamental questions.
And these weren't designed to generate revenue immediately, but to redefine value and build leverage beyond the simple metric of hours billed.
Let's detail these because for any listener who is trying to make that transition from consultant to CEO, answering these three questions with brutal honesty.
That's the strategic architecture of the entire business.
Okay, so what's the first question? The one designed to snap the owner out of that daily chaos.
The first question is the most fundamental. What kind of business? And this forces the owner to define success beyond just simple revenue figures, which are often just a measure of volume and workload.
You have to define the destination.
You have to. Is the goal a lifestyle business, something that funds your freedom and requires minimal staff? Is it a team-based organization which requires delegation, clear structure, and real management responsibilities? Or is it a legacy enterprise meant to scale rapidly, attract investment, and eventually be sold for maximum value?
You know, that distinction is profoundly important, especially for specialized consultants. If you're aiming for a comfortable lifestyle business, chasing multi-million-dollar contracts that require 20 staff and complex org charts, it's actively counterproductive. It's insane. That scale demands leadership time you don't actually want to spend.
Exactly right. And without that clarity of destination, every single decision staffing, pricing, marketing, technology, it's all made on an ad hoc, reactionary basis.
And it often contradicts the true goal.
Every time. If you want freedom, a lifestyle business, but you're constantly taking on clients that require intense hands-on management, which is a legacy structure, you are just creating self-imposed misery. Defining the kind of business immediately informs the required capacity of the owner.
That sets the stage perfectly for the second question, which deals with resources and energy.
That is, what kind of clients? This recognizes the financial and, just as important, the psychological truth that not all revenue is created equal. The question focuses on which clients energize you and the business, reinforcing that strategic direction, versus which ones just drain your capacity and undermine profitability.
And this goes way beyond simple financial profitability, doesn't it? A client might pay their bills on time, but if they require 10 hours of hand-holding, 20 emails, and constant scope creep negotiation for every 1 hour of actual technical work,
You're a nightmare.
they aren't just inefficient, they are actively draining your strategic capacity. The opportunity cost of a draining client is immense.
It is the strategic cost. Mark realized he was spending 60% of his time managing the bottom 20% of his lowest margin revenue. These low-value clients were demanding, they didn't respect boundaries, and they prevented him from taking on larger, more profitable engagements that required dedicated focus.
So by identifying and crucially shedding those clients that didn't align with the kind of business he wanted,
He wasn't just increasing efficiency, he was defining his operational stability and, maybe more importantly, his peace of mind.
And finally, the third question. This is the bridge to achieving real scale and leverage.
The ultimate question of leverage. What kind of systems? This establishes the structures needed to stop trading time for money and instead build sustainable leverage right into your delivery mechanism.
Systems are the vehicle. They're what allows the expertise to be delivered consistently, profitably, and without the owner having to be physically present for every single step. For a QS, what specific systems did Mark need to implement to sort of externalize his expertise?
Well, for a high-level consultant, the systems aren't necessarily complex CRM software, although that can help. For Mark, he needed to codify his specific intellectual property into a process.
For instance,
He implemented standardized project scope checklists and comprehensive client briefing documentation. Before, Mark would just rely on instinct to scope a project, which meant only he could do it.
of course.
Now, the system captured his decision-making process. He also systematized things like change order documentation and automated invoicing triggers tied to project milestones, not hours logged.
So the system allowed an associate to manage the project flow.
Right. It freed Mark up for strategic client conversations and high-level review rather than daily execution.
So the system transformed Mark from the primary source of labor into the primary source of process integrity. He stopped being the system.
And started becoming the architect of the system.
Exactly.
And once these questions were rigorously defined and the answers were implemented, the sources detail this remarkable transformation for Mark.
And it was achieved in the same industry with the same skill set.
But crucially, with a different mindset.
The speed of this transformation is what's really astonishing. 6 months to complete the core shift. And the resulting metrics, they just defy the logic of the treadmill.
They really do.
He cut his client roster in half, 50% fewer clients, which, as we discussed, is the hardest tactical move for a revenue-dependent consultant. And yet, this painful reduction led to a 2x profit increase. He doubled his profitability.
And this is the definitive proof of scaling your thinking. He stopped chasing volume, which is the definition of activity, and started building value, which is the definition of progress.
The mechanism is simple but hard to execute.
It is. By focusing on the highest value clients, that was question 2, and delivering service through defined processes, question 3, that maximized margins and eliminated administrative drag, he could command a significantly higher rate per project. He became strategic and entirely in control. He had traded perpetual reaction for deliberate action.
So Mark's story provides the hard evidence for what the sources call the brutal truth, and they state it explicitly. Your business is an observable reflection of you, the owner.
It is.
This isn't just motivational rhetoric, it is observable structural reality. And this is the point where we have to stop giving ourselves permission to blame external factors for our own internal stagnation.
The business acts as a flawless mirror. It reflects the owner's internal state, their habits, their biases, their tolerance for chaos, directly into the external results and the structure of the organization. And that structure is unavoidable. The sources illustrate this concept perfectly with the fingerprints of the owner.
But wait, I have to challenge this premise just slightly. What about recessions? What about sudden changes in government regulation or disruptive technology? Surely, even the most strategic leader can't avoid all external market forces.
That's a vital clarification. External forces absolutely exist, but the strategic leader manages them differently than the reactive leader.
Okay.
The reflective business, the one that carries the owner's fingerprint, is defined not by whether it experiences market shifts, but by how it responds.
I see.
If your internal house is disorganized, a mild recession becomes a catastrophic threat. But if your systems are robust, your cash flow dynamics are understood, and your capacity is intentionally expanded, that recession actually becomes an opportunity.
An opportunity to acquire talent or market share while others are panicking.
Exactly. So the business mirrors the owner's preparedness and strategic robustness, not merely the economy.
That makes sense. The mirror reflects the internal capacity to handle the external. So let's look at those fingerprints in detail. If the owner is indecisive, how does that actually manifest in the business?
Well, if the owner is chronically indecisive, the pipeline will be messy, indecisive, or just scattered. Indecision means the owner never fully commits to a niche, they never settle on a consistent pricing strategy, or they never lock down a specific client profile.
So the result is a messy, inconsistent sales process that just consumes vast amounts of time chasing leads that are fundamentally unsuitable.
And you waste so much energy because you're afraid of saying no and committing to a profitable yes.
And what if the owner lacks clear strategic focus?
Operations will scatter, projects veer off course because there are no codified priorities. Staff members don't know where to focus their energy, which leads to duplication of effort and burnout.
The entire organization becomes a constant game of whack-a-mole.
Yes, with the owner perpetually diverted to putting out fires that their own lack of focus ignited in the first place.
And the most difficult fingerprint to face, if the owner avoids accountability, either to themselves, their team, or their own standards.
Then the results will too. If the owner has a persistent habit of making excuses, of delaying difficult conversations, or postponing investment in necessary but expensive structures,
Like firing a client who treats the staff poorly.
or upgrading essential software, or just holding a team member to a high standard of meticulous QS work, the business results will inevitably reflect that avoidance. Every single consultancy carries the fingerprints of its owner's specific, deeply ingrained mindset, habits, and personal standards.
This means that the transition to growth, the kind of transformation Mark experienced, it necessitates facing the uncomfortable parts of yourself. It requires facing the parts of the self the owner would rather avoid, those deeply ingrained habits that no longer serve a leader, and the self-limiting stories they tell themselves about why change is too hard or why they can't delegate effectively.
Growth demands productive discomfort. You simply cannot build a scalable, structured, predictable business on a psychological foundation of scattered reactive habits.
And this is where we have to establish a very clear distinction between superficial fixes and true, deep transformation.
Yes, because so many consultants waste years chasing the wrong type of change.
So what does chasing surface changes look like in practice for a consultant?
Service changes are They're helpful window dressing, but they are not game changers. They often involve external branding or minor tactical tweaks.
Like designing a new logo.
A new logo, adopting a slightly more focused niche but not really committing to it, revising your pricing structure slightly, or spending thousands of dollars updating your website's aesthetic. These are cosmetic changes.
Right.
They might slightly improve the presentation of the business, but they do nothing to address the operational choke point, which is always rooted in the owner's capacity and systems.
So, if your internal operating system is riddled with bugs like poor decision hygiene or fear of delegation, putting a shiny new user interface on your website doesn't fix the underlying code.
Not all.
Where does the true deep transformation happen then?
Deep changes are the real game changers because they alter that internal operating system. This is where you fundamentally upgrade your decision-making process, you strengthen your leadership capacity so you can hire and actually trust people, you refine your long-term strategic thinking, and most importantly, you raise your personal standards for organizational performance and accountability.
Can you give me a concrete example of a deep change that leads to measurable leverage?
Sure. A surface change is deciding to raise your hourly rate by 10%.
Okay.
A deep change is committing to 1 hour every single week to define a new value-based fee structure that permanently decouples your revenue from your time, even if it means losing 30% of your old hourly rate clients.
Yeah.
The deep change is the transformation of your belief system about how you generate value. If your leadership capacity increases, you can effectively delegate the entire operational flow of a project, allowing you to focus purely on business development and strategic review. That is an internal upgrade resulting in massive external leverage.
And this brings the good news delivered by the mirror analogy.
Yes.
The mirror doesn't lie, but it is entirely within your control. When the owner commits to changing what they see in themselves, when they face that discomfort and commit to those deep changes, the reflection, the business results, they shift immediately. The business is fundamentally just waiting for the owner to evolve into the leader it needs. And this evolution, it can't be some vague goal or a temporary burst of motivation. The sources stress the absolute necessity of systematizing this process.
Right.
Personal growth has to be treated like a critical business project with measurable milestones, clear feedback loops, and consistent daily habits. The shift isn't some sudden dramatic leap, it's cumulative and it's compounding.
Treating growth as a project is so vital because it moves the process from abstract wishful thinking to concrete, measurable execution. If your business has key performance indicators, your personal development needs them too. And the sources provide a highly effective 4-step framework that turns introspection into repeatable, scalable action.
Okay, let's bring it down.
The process has to begin with step 1, awareness. This is the foundational mandate.
Yeah.
You have to identify what is really limiting you, moving past the comfortable, generalized excuses. It demands brutal honesty about the actual constraints on your capacity.
And this requires an introspection that goes well beyond generic complaints like, I just don't have enough time for marketing. The critical question is, why don't you have time? Is the constraint actually a fear of rejection, which makes you procrastinate on high-value sales follow-up calls? Is it a comfort zone, a preference for simply being busy because that feels productive, but it actively prevents strategic focus? You have to pinpoint the specific behavioral or emotional constraint.
Let's explore that. For Mark, a key constraint was the fear of losing his identity as the indispensable expert. And that led to him micromanaging every single detail, which in turn limited the time he had for strategy.
I see.
So awareness for him meant identifying that the operational bottleneck wasn't the complexity of the QS work. It was his psychological need to be involved in every technical decision. Once he identified that constraint, the next steps became much clearer.
Which brings us to step 2. Ownership.
Exactly. Once you have identified the target constraint, the next mandate is to stop externalizing the problem. You must take full, unreserved responsibility for where you are and for where you are going.
This is maybe the hardest mindset shift because externalization is such a potent defense mechanism. We hear it constantly in the consulting world. My clients are cheap, or the market is too competitive.
My staff are just not proactive enough.
Yeah. Ownership means realizing that if your clients are consistently cheap, you chose a poor positioning or pricing strategy. If the market feels too competitive, you failed to communicate a clear differentiation.
The shift is recognizing the market isn't the reason for the struggle. The owner's mindset and their resulting action is the reason. And that perspective is inherently empowering.
How so?
By taking full ownership, You stop being a victim of external circumstances, and you immediately gain total control over the variables that actually matter: your own actions, your standards, your strategic direction. You realize the solution doesn't require a market upturn. It just requires a decision from you.
And that empowerment provides the necessary drive for step 3, action.
Yes.
The mandate here is practical and systematic. Build one new high-leverage habit each month that expands your capacity as a business owner. This has to be intentional and protected time.
And we have to emphasize high leverage. We are not talking about minor tweaks like answering emails faster. We're talking about habits that fundamentally change the flow of energy and time and reduce your dependence on operational execution.
So for Mark,
For instance, Mark started implementing a dedicated mandatory weekly review every Friday afternoon. This review was to look at the business, not in it. He assessed strategy, he reviewed key financial dynamics, and he dedicated time to systemizing his next step.
that one habit alone is a massive capacity expander. It guarantees that strategic thinking actually gets addressed, not just squeezed in between client calls. What other specific high-leverage habits should consultants focus on?
Delegation is a habit, not a task. It has to be treated as a proactive strategy. This means building a standard operating procedure, an SOP, for delegation once a month. Identify one task you routinely handle that someone else can do 80% as well, and then create a system for them to handle it permanently.
What else?
Another high-leverage habit is consistent time blocking for strategic, deep work, not operational work. For a QS, this might be 2 protected mornings a week, dedicated solely to writing a new premium proposal template or refining the scope of work documentation.
And crucially, tracking key metrics beyond simple revenue. Revenue is a lagging indicator.
It is. A high-leverage habit is tracking leading indicators like pipeline quality, utilization rates of your staff, and margin percentage per client segment. These are habits that shift the owner from being an operator to being a strategic manager.
And finally, the step that ensures all this growth is sustainable and compounding.
Step 4. Reflection. The mandate is simple. Audit what worked and what didn't work. Regular, structured reflection is the mechanism that transforms mere experience into genuine, applicable wisdom.
I think this is where most consultants fail. They get busy, the project ends, and they immediately jump to the next one without processing the last one.
Absolutely. Experience is what happens to you. Wisdom is what you learn from it. If you run your business for 5 years and never formally reflect on why certain strategies failed or why certain clients were disasters, you don't have 5 years of wisdom. You just have 5 years of repeated experience.
Reflection closes the loop.
It does. Mark, in his reflection, realized he consistently underestimated the time required for complex structural estimations. That allowed him to immediately correct his pricing strategy in the next quarter. Without reflection, that error would have just remained a recurring drain on his profit.
So this 4-step cycle, awareness, ownership, action, reflection, this is what creates real internal momentum. This is the competitive advantage that no amount of money or marketing can buy.
It eliminates that constant reliance on external motivation. The momentum is generated from within because the owner knows their system is working, and they are measurably expanding their capacity every single month.
And the ultimate difference is this. While competitors are waiting for perfect market conditions or desperately reacting to unexpected circumstances, the consultant who masters this framework is proactively building capacity, shaping their market position, and setting the terms of their own success.
They become the strategic shaper, not the reactive participant. So if that personal growth framework is the engine, then what are the specific strategic disciplines that successful consultants adopt? The source material makes it really clear. The successful quantity surveying consultants, they aren't necessarily the ones with the highest IQ or the longest tenure.
No.
They're the ones who treat personal growth as an ongoing, non-negotiable business discipline.
This is the visible manifestation of that different mindset we talked about with Mark's transformation. It's the difference between being a brilliant technician who just happened to start a business and being a business owner who delivers brilliant technical services through a sophisticated organization.
Right. And the first discipline is expanding the strategic toolkit. While their competitors are busy complaining about difficult clients or market competition, these successful consultants are aggressively reading business books, studying leadership theory, and learning foundational principles from entirely different industries.
And that provides them with incredible leverage, doesn't it? A QS who understands basic marketing positioning, who grasps software pricing strategy like tiered models or subscription structures.
Or who studies lean organizational structure from the manufacturing sector.
They immediately hold a strategic advantage over the competitor who only reads technical journals. They just have a broader set of intellectual levers to pull when the market or client demands shift.
They apply multidisciplinary thinking. For example, by understanding software pricing, Mark realized he could move from a traditional cost-plus model, which relies on tracking hours, to a SaaS-style tiered fixed-fee model.
Based on project complexity.
Exactly. Low, medium, or high.
Th-
The client is paying for the certainty of scope delivery and the quality of the IP, not the hours spent. That move requires strategic thinking, not technical expertise.
Okay, the second discipline.
Building premium value. While others are focusing only on chasing rates, always adjusting their fees downward to compete on price-successful consultants, diligently studied positioning and differentiation.
They realize that price becomes the only factor in the absence of perceived value.
In the absence of differentiation, yeah. By committing to building premium value, they define a specific, unique position in the marketplace. Maybe specializing only in forensic structural damage estimation or high-rise complex contracts. This focus allows them to select the best clients and charge based on the certainty of outcomes and the risk mitigation they provide.
Not just the hours they log.
And that is the structural move that allowed Mark to cut his clients and double his profit.
It transforms them from being a replaceable commodity, just a provider of technical labor, to being an irreplaceable strategic partner in the client's success.
Precisely. And the third essential discipline is understanding dynamics. They review cash flow regularly, moving far beyond just checking the bank balance to understanding the financial dynamics that truly drive sustainable growth.
Help us clarify that distinction, because a lot of people confuse checking the bank balance with financial management.
The bank balance is a rear-view mirror metric. It tells you where you are right now, a static number. Financial dynamics, however, are a predictive model.
Okay.
This involves understanding your working capital flow, analyzing your accounts receivable velocity, and mapping your future capital requirements based on your current pipeline. A strategic consultant isn't worried about whether they can make payroll next month.
Because they can see it coming.
They understand their cash flow dynamics and can predict, 6 months out, when they will need to hire or when they need to adjust payment terms to optimize capital flow.
This elevates them from being merely profitable to being financially intelligent and robust. They are proactive investors in their future, not just recipients of revenue.
Ultimately, all of these disciplines just reinforce the core conclusion of the sources. Your personal growth creates the capacity for business growth. Your evolution enables organizational evolution. It is the predictable outcome of treating personal development, your internal strategic upgrade, as the primary competitive strategy.
If you start growing.
Your business will inevitably stall and shrink to the size of your current management limits.
The consultancy reflects your leadership standards, your current thinking, and your level of organizational evolution. It shows you exactly where you are in your development as a business owner. This mirror is relentless, but it's also the most accurate diagnostic tool you possess.
The current business results are simply reflecting the truth of your daily priorities, your habits, and your decisions right back to you. The moment you decide to upgrade the foundation, the owner, everything else in the business, shifts into a place where true scale becomes inevitable.
This has been a deeply insightful and challenging deep dive. It's forced us to look inward for the solutions we often spend years seeking externally. We've covered the invisible wall, the brutal truth of the business mirror, and that four-step framework for deep change.
And for anyone listening who is currently on that treadmill, juggling too many low-value clients and constantly feeling overwhelmed, the biggest shift begins with an honest answer to one question. A question that cuts through all the noise of activity and targets the real constraint.
So, we want to leave you, our listener, with the crucial reflection question posed in the source material. Something for you to contemplate as you put down the operational tasks for the day and pick up the mantle of strategic leader. What's one area of personal growth, a specific, avoided limitation, that if you improved it this week, would immediately and demonstrably elevate your consultancy's strategic capacity?
And don't choose the easiest answer. Don't choose what sounds like the right answer. Think about the one thing you have been actively pushing aside. Is it the fear of delegation that keeps you mired in technical review? Is it your inability to set a protected time block for strategic planning? Is it a lack of commitment to that weekly financial review?
Be brutally honest and commit to prioritizing that single avoided development area, because that, according to everything we've analyzed today, is where your next level of business growth is waiting. The only question left is whether you are ready to face the mirror and build the capacity to accept it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into self-limitation and strategic transformation.
We'll catch you next time for more in-depth analysis.